Hey brothers and sisters, this is Francis Santa Rose doing a second video today. So I was in Matthew 24, and it's interesting because I was praying about it and asking the Lord to show me something about the end time. I said, show me something I haven't seen, or I've seen it but I didn't look into it the same way. Show me something I haven't noticed before. It's interesting because he sent me, actually, I opened it, Matthew 24. I opened right to it. So I asked him to show me something about the end time. Fan through my Bible, I open up to Matthew 24, which is the end time. And when I open it up, I look at Matthew 24, and I feel the Holy Spirit prompting me, saying, go read 23 first. 23 is the lead up to 24, and 23 is interesting because Jesus is basically picking a fight with the Pharisees before the cross. He's got to go to the cross, and they're kind of reluctant to take him. They're plotting and planning and stuff, but they've been reluctant. They're not quite sure what to do. So he just goes and picks a fight with them. He calls them out. He calls them hypocrites. He calls them brood of vipers. He's just picking a fight with them. Woe to you hypocrites, you brood of vipers. He's just telling them off, and he's embarrassing them in front of all the people. You got to understand, he's got all the people there. That the Pharisees and the rabbis and the scribes were all exalted and looked up to as the religious leaders, and they're all there, and the people are all there, all those people. And Jesus telling the people, hey, don't look at these guys anymore. These guys are hypocrites. There's liars. There's thieves. Don't be like them. They always want the best seats in the house, and they do. He's calling them snakes. Basically, he's calling them, when you call somebody a viper or a brood of vipers, it means you're a liar. All right? You're a thief. You're a cheat. It's not good. And he's embarrassing them right in front of them. They're right there. So they're like furious, right? So he picks a fight with them. And then, he accuses them of killing the prophets. They're like, what do you mean we did it? Hey, look it, you did it. And then at the end of that, he says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you are not willing. And then his heart is going out to him because he doesn't want them to go to hell. He sees their end. He knows where they're going, what they're doing, and it's breaking his heart. Those are his children. He loves them. It's like, it'd be just like us. If you saw your child was strung out on crack, and you went over to the crack house and you're trying to get him out, and he won't come, and you can't make him come. He's at that age, he's like, 17, 18, 19, and he won't come. He's just strung out on crack. It's never happened to me, praise God. But I can imagine that would be just horrible for a parent. And there's Jesus. He's watching them go to hell, and he's trying everything he knows to do, and he knows that they're not going to get it. And he's brokenhearted there. He says, and your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more till you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now, after that, Matthew 24 starts, and it says, then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple, and said to him, do you not see all these things? And he said to them, do you not see all these things? Surely I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon the other that shall not be thrown down. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, they asked three questions. Well, actually, they asked three questions. Number one, tell us when these things will be. Tell us when these things will be. Number two, what will be the sign of your coming? And number three, end of the age. All right. Now these questions require three answers, and Jesus actually answers all three specifically. He doesn't, Matthew 24 is not a group of just like a blanket answer, but he answers each question, which something I didn't notice was the order which he answers them. For instance, he says, tell us when these things will be. Like, when is this going to happen? When is the end coming? When is going to be the rapture? When is going to be the tribulation? When are you returning? So there's a timing issue, and he starts talking about all the things that are going to happen so they know when. He says these things will happen. Number 2, they said, what will be the sign of your coming? Now, the coming of Jesus is not the rapture. The coming of Jesus is when he steps his foot on the Mount of Olives, and the mountain is split in half, and he puts down Satan for 1,000 years, and he rules and reigns. Then they said, and tell us when is the end of the age. What is the age? The age of grace. That's the rapture. So they asked the question in reverse order. Not tell us when these things are coming, tell us when the rapture is, and then tell us when you're coming back. They said, tell us when these things, tell us what it's going to be like, how are we going to know when it's time? Tell us when you're coming back, and then tell us about the rapture. See, they flipped the two, and he answers them in the order that they asked him. And when we read Matthew 24, we're reading it in chronological order, and it's not. We're looking at it like, and that's the confusion. That's what God showed me. There's a lot of confusion in the end time, because we're looking at Matthew 24 like these things are, he's talking about it, this is going to happen, 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 but that's not it, because that's not the way they asked the question. He answers the question in the order they asked it. It's this is going to happen, then he skips over to this is going to happen, and then he goes back to, and then this is going to happen. This is what happens. So one of the things that he showed me was, okay, so he starts talking about the timing. First of all, when is this going to be? He says, many come in my name and they deceive you. You heard wars and rumors of wars. Well, all that stuff has been going on for in the 19th and in the 20th century, basically. You're looking at all that's going on. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended and betray one another. And that's really happening now. You know, a lot of times we look at stuff like who was it? I'm not going to name any names, but there's some people that are really, you know, they're great watchmen, and they're watching for the Lord. And there was a video just recently by a lovely man, and he does a lot of great stuff, and he's just searching like the rest of us. You know, nobody's got it figured out. None of us got this thing figured out. If anybody says they got it figured out, they're a liar. They're deceived. But in the video it says, you know, the tribulation's going to start, you know, at this time, like in a few months or in a month or so in the future. And I'm telling you, we're in it. Yeah, I'm here in Houston, okay? If anybody was here during the floods, or if anybody knows anything about the floods, that was tribulation. If anybody was in Florida during that hurricane, that was tribulation. All those people that are up in California right now, that's tribulation. We're in the tribulation. All over the world, the world is in tribulation right now, but you know, if it's not on our doorstep, we're not in tribulation. You know, because we're not going through it. But just because it isn't on our doorstep, and when I say our, it's been on my doorstep. But if it hasn't been on your doorstep, it just hasn't been on your doorstep yet. But there's people in the world. Look, there's tribes in Africa that the Muslims are coming in, butchering people for their belief in Jesus. So everything that Jesus is writing here is going on right now. It's going on right now. All right? The tribulation is not going to happen. We're in it. We may not be in the great tribulation, but we're in tribulation right now. You know, and then he goes on to speak of Well, he showed me this. This is really one thing that jumped out at me. There it is. Sorry. He said, therefore you also be ready. And he's always talking about being ready. You know, in Luke 21:36, he says, watch. And the word watch, we've discussed this a million times, comes from the temple guards who are supposed to stay awake so the captain of the guard doesn't catch them sleeping and light their clothes on fire. It's about doing what we're doing. We're supposed to be doing what we're doing. We're supposed to be watching. To watch means to be actively seeking out, reading the scriptures, you know, studying to show ourselves approved, to be trying. This is where our Father wants us. This is right where He wants us. He wants us doing what we're doing. We're seeking His heart. We're looking for it. The thing is, I'm wondering more and more lately, and more as each day goes by, if we're not supposed to know. I mean, I've talked about this before. I'm just going to mention it again. We're supposed to be fighting ISIS. Now, we're not. America actually is ISIS. We started ISIS. Obama started ISIS. He funded ISIS. He trained ISIS. He furnishes them with weapons. I mean, think about it logically. Bashar al-Assad is fighting ISIS. America is fighting Bashar al-Assad. Wait a minute. What happened to the old adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend? If we were really fighting ISIS, why are we fighting Bashar al-Assad in Russia, in Syria? Because Russia is truly fighting ISIS. Bashar al-Assad is truly fighting ISIS, yet we're fighting Bashar al-Assad. I mean, anybody ever wonder why we're not truly fighting ISIS? And if anybody saw that recent post from Anonymous about what went down in Vegas, quite interesting. Anywho, Obama used to fly over ISIS and drop down flyers and say, we are fixing to come and bomb this target in just a little bit. So you guys have 40 minutes to evacuate and take with you whatever you need. And we're going to do like a pretend bombing run over here to make it look like we're actually fighting you guys. But, you know, you have time to get away. And then he would come and bomb an area that was already deserted and say, yes, we're fighting ISIS. Well, see, telling your enemy what you're going to do before you do it is not a wise strategy. And I'm beginning to think that the reason there's a lot of confusion and everybody's wrong about all these dates is, what if we are not going to know exactly when? Because He's hiding it from the enemy. I mean, if Satan really knew when we were going to get raptured, it would probably change his tactics. It would probably make him more intense. It would probably be a lot worse for us. So what if, out of love, think about it like this. Like, if you knew, let's say you had somebody in your life that was really somebody you just loved. I mean, they were a family member, a relative, a great friend, just somebody that you really cared about. And you had some really important information, but if it got out, it would hurt people. You know what I mean? You kind of need to keep it to yourself. And your friend, whom, you generally would share important information to you, they're a person with a big mouth. They can't keep it in. They got to talk. They're not really so much a gossip, but they like to tell people stuff. If you tell them, everybody in your family knows. Everybody knows, and it might hurt somebody. You know, you don't want that. You're not going to tell that person because you don't want everybody to know. What if God is not telling us because we couldn't keep our mouth shut? Because he's sparing us what the enemy would do if he had this information. Because trust me, this be like World War II. You know, Satan is watching us and spying on us all the time, trying to break our codes, trying to find out what we know. Because understand that while he reads the Bible, the wisdom of God is spiritually discerned. You have to have the Spirit of God to discern it. You know, when Peter figured out that Jesus was the Christ, when Jesus looked at him and said to him, he said, Peter, you didn't figure that out. It's not in your own intellect that you got that, but the Holy Spirit revealed it to you. Your Father revealed that to you. He reveals stuff to us. Well, Satan doesn't have the Spirit of God. So he uses us to put together the information he needs to try and figure out when all this stuff is going down, and he's trying to formulate his plans on what he's doing. So what if out of benevolence our Father is not telling us specifically to spare us, harm, hurt? I don't know. It's just something that I've been thinking about lately. I haven't come to a conclusion yet. I'm just throwing it out there. Think about that, people. You know, there's a lot of really awesome people that watch. So, you know, I wanted to put it out there and get some feedback on it. I'm just thinking out loud right now. So, hold on. Give me just 1 second here. Okay, so that's one reason. And the second reason is this. Jesus gives this little analogy here. He says, but if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched. And then he also gives another analogy of the servants. If they had known what hour the master was coming back, they would have watched. And that one is actually more interesting because the master doesn't tell his servants when he's coming back because he wants to surprise them to find out what they're really doing. So for instance, let's say the master said, look, I'm going to be gone for a year. I'll be back on the 10th of October next year. Those servants could act like a fool that whole time, and at sometime around October 1st, run around and clean everything up and fix everything and get ready and be all there acting normal for when the master comes home. So he would think that they were just perfect the whole time, which wasn't the case. But by not telling them, they're forced to be in ready mode all the time. And when he gives that analogy of the master and the servants, it's like he's telling them, I don't want you to know, and it's for your own good. Because if you know when I'm coming, you'll probably misbehave until I get there. What if we're not supposed to know? I mean, I've always maintained that we were, but, you know, as we mature, as we grow, as we learn, God starts teaching us new things, and we start seeing it from a different point of view, or, you know, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. So anyways, he says, therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. And that little sentence right there, an hour that you do not expect, just kind of jumped out at me. And we keep looking at dates like, you know, okay, for instance, here's the sign, the Revelation sign, and that was great. I mean, Scotty Clark did just an amazing job on that. And, oh gosh, what's his name from A Parable of the Vineyard? I forget his name. Sorry. He really just, their stuff was right on. It was great. But there was nothing in the sign that said he was coming on the sign. just that the sign would present itself, and then these things would transpire, and sometime thereafter he's coming. So, you know, when God told me, listen, it's 5777, and when he said, you know, I don't go by that calendar, and man, one of my subs told me, he wrote in and asked me, he said, are you sure you're not talking about this other calendar? And I remember I saw that, and I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to go home so bad that I just refused to believe that there was even another calendar until the weekend when Rosh Hashanah was coming up. Before Rosh Hashanah came up, it started in my spirit, and I started checking out with my friend Yossi and asking him, hey, are there two calendars? Because I remembered that guy's comment. He was like, oh yeah, absolutely. There are two calendars. And man, and that's what the Lord meant when he said, I don't go by that calendar. So here's the point. When he spoke to me and he told me 5777, I clearly felt in my spirit him telling me it's enough to know the season. That he really didn't want me. And I stopped studying it. I mean, I just let it go after that. That's when I went out. That's when he kind of blessed me with the whole thing of the healing ministry. And I stopped focusing on the dates and the times and all that stuff. And I just started doing my job. I was like the servant who was doing his job till the master came back. I was like, I not was and stopped. I still am. And, you know, and I'm not going to kid you, when the Revelation, or when the Revelation 12 sign came out, I was really looking at that. It was real exciting. I was looking forward to it like everyone else, you know, because what I'm going through, I'm like done. I'm done too. You know, I'm done, guys. I'm so done. I am so done. I just, you know, I just want to be with my Lord. I want to be with Jesus. But you know what? I made a new friend recently, and I've enjoyed their company, and I'm not as done as I was. So that's been nice. It's been nice. And thank you for that, by the way. They know who they are. And so what was I saying? Oh, he says, for the Son of Man is coming in an hour you don't know. Now, why would he say that unless he meant that? Jesus didn't say things frivolously. He never made a statement and came back to his disciples and said, you know, guys, I didn't really intend to say that. What I meant was this. No, he didn't. He didn't. And when I saw that, immediately I thought, I don't think he's coming on a feast day. I don't think he's coming on a day like a high watch. People talk about these high watch. This is a high watch time. And it's just my opinion. Look, I can only give my opinion on this stuff. I don't think he's coming on a high watch time. I think he's coming like, you know, it'll be like now, when we least expect it. Which is, when you go back to all those like mini parables of where he's saying, just be ready all the time, because I'm coming when you least expect it. Be ready all the time. I'm coming when you least expect it. Be that servant who is just ready all the time, because he didn't know when his master was coming. Because I do believe, though, that we're going to know the day of. Maybe like right before, sometime thereof. I remember that story that Elijah, where he knew he was going, and Elisha knew he was going. And I for a long time I was mentioning that I thought it would be like that we'd know the whole day before. But Jesus didn't say like in the days of Elijah. He said like in the days of Noah. So I'm leaning against that now. I don't know. And I hate to be wishy-washy, but I just got to be honest. I know that in the parable of the 10 virgins says, a crier went out ahead of the bridegroom, said, the bridegroom cometh. So at some point we're going to hear it. When? I don't know. I just know I don't think it's going to be on a feast day. I don't think it's going to be a high watch day. I think we just need to be ready all the time. And I think we need to be ready all the time starting now. Like when you watch this, just purpose in your heart that it's time to go. And we're going to go any second now, any minute, any hour, and that's like what he told me. He said, every second, every minute, every hour, and every day that I give you is by my grace. Get your heart ready to go home. Just flat out. That's what he was saying. And when you look back at that, he's just saying, I'm not telling you when. It's the season. It's enough to know the season. So y'all, it's enough to know the season. We're in the greatest season in the history of the world, with the exception